What's going on, Tamers? It's me, Guy, trying to figure out how he's going to cram 5 video recording sessions into 2 days. But yeah, that's my problem to worry about, I suppose. I'm actually going home for the holidays, and I'll be in the States for the rest of December from this Wednesday until like most of January. Uploads on the channel are probably going to be pretty slow, just because I don't have any of my cards that I would have here. I've got like in one of those closets, all my cards are just going to get left behind, unfortunately, because I can't use Japanese cards in America. I might try to check out a couple of my locals. Some of you guys have suggested in other videos. I'll definitely give that a shot if I can find some locals in my hometown. Anyway, I hope that you folks also take some time during the holidays to rest, relax, and have fun with your friends and family, whatever that looks like for you. So we finally reached week 3 of the BT12 across time meta over here in Asia. And this week is kind of special because the start of the Area 2 qualifiers for the Evolution Cup has started. What that basically equates to, if you don't know what that is like the regional qualifiers for Japan, basically. So a couple months back, we had the Area 1 qualifiers, which is basically like locals, and then the winners of those are going to move on to the regional finals that are happening this month, actually. Keep in mind, another big thing did happen over the course of the past week, and that is the Beelzebubmon Advanced deck did release. I did a ton of info on that, including a box opening as well as a trial match with that. So if you want to figure out what those decks do, the cards that come in there as well, and kind of understand how they beef up the Beelzebubmon archetype as a whole, David, take a look at both of those on the channel as well. Anyway, let's take a look at some of the results, a few key takeaways, as well as a couple of the lists of the decks that I've topped over the past week. Alright, so taking a look at the results from the past week, you probably noticed right off the bat that the results here are way tighter than they've been for a long time in weeks past, and I think the reason is because the Area 2 qualifiers are really bringing out like the super sweat, and so there's not a ton of variance here as far as lots of decks topping like we've seen over the past couple of weeks. Of course, there have been some just locals that are also in these results, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But just going from top to bottom here, I think it's no surprise to anybody that the Wargreymon deck, the black-red version of the Wargreymon deck, is still doing very, very well, as the Hunter deck that's been introduced. Both of these decks are still competing neck and neck, despite both of them settling down and finding more consistent builds. I do want to make a note of something that one of the viewers had mentioned last week in one of the videos, and that is that I may be being a little bit misleading in showing the picture here. I should probably update this in the future, but when I say Black Wargreymon X Antibody, this includes things like the new Black-Red Wargreymon, as well as Red X Antibody Wargreymon as well. And because the deck has kind of gone under this like weird, I don't know, polymerization, is that the right word to use in Digimon, of or fusion of archetypes, I think that they've settled on a build that focuses on the new Black-Red Wargreymon, and then uses some of the higher end Wargreymon cards like Black Wargreymon X Antibody, Black Wargreymon, Gyomon as finishers for the deck. Meanwhile, the Hunter archetype has changed pretty significantly in that they typically are using a lot more of the yellow, green, and purple cards, where in the beginning they were typically using things like the Shoutmon, Damemon, and the Tsuomon, or excuse me, Tuarmon. Things have definitely shaken up in this deck, and we'll take a look at one of the deck lists later to see how it's actually panned out. Additionally, I did mention that the Beelzebubmon Advanced deck released last Friday, and because of that, it's in these week's tournament results fully, and it has taken some huge wins over the course of the past week. We'll take a look at one of the Area 2 qualifiers where this deck won, and I think if you're looking for a really consistent, solid build, that'll be the one to look for. Additionally, Blue Lord has seen some huge gains with the addition of Quartzmon. I mentioned this in weeks past, I believe it was just week 1, where folks are trying this out. Might have been week 2, well, we'll see. But yeah, adding a couple, 2 or 3 copies of Quartzmon to the top end of Bloomlord and Hydramon really helps the deck out a lot. Where the first week I didn't see too many results, now it's starting to take some pretty big wins in major places. And so, again, if you have Bloomlord, this deck is still going to be around for quite a while. And as a neat little surprise here, if you move down the list, you'll see that Imperialdramon, for the first time, has kind of risen on this list. I think that we kind of agreed over the past 2 weeks that Red Hybrid was one of the stronger new decks released in BT12, and Imperialdramon was still struggling to find a really good build. Even some folks in my Discord and I were kind of discussing like how we should build this deck, because we really couldn't find like a nice, easy build that we all agreed on or all liked. But it seems like over the past week, this deck did take a couple of wins, and they made a couple of, I don't know if I'd say weird changes, but they made some interesting choices for the deck list that have top. We'll take a look at that a little bit later as well. And then rounding out the bottom of the list, we've got Jesmon GX doing some work, as well as Shoutmon and the rest of the Crossheart archetype still taking some wins over the course of the week. And then rounding out the bottom here, we've got Grandis. Again, as long as you're going to have, I think, these Wargreymon decks in the meta, you're always going to have Grandis around because it is the check. and then things like 1 copy of Machinedramon. We had an O-Force Veedramon top, as well as 1 copy of the purple-yellow Mastodon using the new Mirai Tamer that I introduced in the last set, I believe. Yeah, BT11. And additionally, we have a really, really cool Eosmon control deck. Now, when I saw this on the list, I was like, Eosmon really top? And I definitely want to show this one off because it's a really interesting concept. Mostly a white deck, but it uses cards like Quartzmon and some other control tools to really hamper your opponent's game plans and really like slow them down to a trudge. And with that being said, let's take a look at some of those decks that actually topped from this list. So the first deck we're going to take a look at is going to be one of the Hunter decks that topped over the course of the past week. And this is what I would consider like a really like solidified build here. It feels like out of all the decks that I looked at, this one had like the least amount of frills and like extra added stuff. And so just so you guys have a reference point whenever you're building your own Hunter deck, I think this is a good place to start from. See a couple copies of the Shoutmon as well as the Akakimon on the lower levels and the Dracomon, just so you can use some of those tamers you don't have on the field that you have in hand and recycle them for card draw over the course of the game. We've also got the Gumdramon and the Psychemon for draw here, as well as the Shoutmon King version, which allows you to basically play one of these tamers for free in your hand. You'll notice that there's no Damemon or 2Rmon, so you could like search out for tamers in the top 3 cards of your deck and then play those, or like de-Digivolve here. The upper end of the deck is mostly focused on either Arresterdramon with the superior modes over here, or Astamon and a couple copies of the Quartzmon here. I will say that I think this deck has maybe 1 too many copies of Quartzmon, but I mean, if you want to make sure that you consistently have them in hand, I think 3 is a good number to go with. And then finally taking a look at some of the tamers here, where in previous weeks, folks weren't really using mini versions of the old Clock Shop guy. I think that this deck card has become a staple in the deck. 2 or 3 copies I think is a pretty good place to put it. And then just a couple copies of the other tamers here, the Taiki, the Yu, as well as the Taikiru. And then finally, the 1 restricted copy of Calling from the Darkness, just so you can recycle some of those cards from before. You'll see the 2 cards here, the Agumon and the Omegamon here, or the Omnimon here in English, but keep in mind these cards are just here because this is like his prize for winning the Area 2 qualifiers. The next deck we're going to take a look at is actually going to be Beelzemon. So again, Beelzemon had the advanced deck come out last week, and the thing that I like about this deck a lot is that most of the cards that are in the advanced deck can be used in this deck as well. You actually don't need too many other cards alongside of it. This deck does go the X-Antibody option, so you can see a couple of the X-Antibody cards like X-Antibody Impamon here, the X-Antibody Wizardmon, as well as I think we have a couple copies of, yeah, just one copy of the X-Antibody Beelzemon. So yeah, if you have some of those old X-Antibody cards that came out, I believe, in BT12, grab a couple of copies of those, slot them into the deck, and you're in a pretty good spot. You'll notice that this also uses 1 copy of the old secret rare Beelzemon Blast Mode, I think from EX2, and then 2 copies of the old Ai and Makoto tamers from before. I think it's Ai and Mako in English. Someone double check me in the comments. I will say that the 1 chase card for this deck, and this is probably going to be the card that's going to cost you the most to put this thing together, is going to be the super rare Beelzebubmon here. This guy, 4 of in the deck required, and he is a pretty hefty price to pay right now. I think when I last went to my card shop, it was like $18 for 1 copy of the card. I think before the advanced deck release, this guy was like cheaper than chips, and now he has like shot up in price because he is like the chase card right now for, I guess, the whole meta. But like I said, tons of cards that just come in the advanced deck here. You see the Ballmons, the Ayamakoto Tamer, the Witchmon, Warring Shots. We also see 4 copies of the Deathslinger here option card, as well as 4 copies of the new Impmon. And what's really cool is this is an Impmon that doesn't come in the advanced deck per se, but the advanced deck does have a couple of like promo cards that are alternate art and look really nice, and this is actually one of those. So if you get 1 copy of the advanced deck, then you'll get 2 of these. So if you get 2 of the advanced decks, you'll basically get 2 of these, and you'll be able to put the deck together as well. Again, super good value. The one thing you're gonna have to spend on is definitely gonna be this Beelzebubmon up here, level 6 from, I believe, was this EX2? I think it was. I think it's the EX2 Beelzebubmon. But yeah, if you've got that card just kind of sitting around, then this is a fantastic deck to make when it drops on the E inside. This next deck we're going to take a look at is actually the Imperialdramon build, and this one comes out of Malaysia by a guy from the name of Azroy. Congrats Azroy out there. He topped with this deck here. I think the thing that I find the most interesting about his build is that it's mostly a lot of the old cards, but he's just only sprinkled in some of the new cards here. So we see at the top end here 2 of the older Imperialdramon Dragon modes. He's only got 1 of the newer ones, as well as the 1 new fighter mode as well. We also see he's got some of the older copies of Pyledramon, which is honestly just a fantastic card. And then only a couple copies of the new Pyledramon and Danobimon. And like, The one thing that he's doing that I think a lot of folks aren't doing, and I'm so happy to see this finally, is that a lot of folks aren't using, I think, Rhydamon to its full potential here. This card is fantastic. It counts as a blue or green, which allows you to joggers into your level 5s really quickly. So I don't know why more folks aren't just including this card as a 4 of in all these Imperialdramon decks. But he does have 4 copies here, and what I love about this here, he mixes in just one single copy of the Fire Rocket, just so he can get that extra hit if he does have it in hand. So this is a nice little like high roll tech. Using the Fire Rocket with the Rhydamons here. The low end of the deck does actually have a lot of the new cards, however. We see like the 4 copies of the Vmon, the Wormmon, the new Worm and Vmon here, as well as the 4 copies of the Stingmon and X-Vmon as well. One thing to note is that he actually doesn't use any copies of the new Davis Tamer, and so he's only going to be using the old Search Tamer here, as well as the dual color Davis and Kin Tamer. And then just rounding out the deck with 2 copies of Hammer Spark as well as Mega Death. I definitely want to try this out. I think that peppering in only a couple of the newer cards on the top end is probably a really good way to go, just because I think a lot of the older cards are also just so strong already. And then using a lot of the newer cards for the lower end, which allows you to search faster to get to those level 5s and level 6s, is probably a really good way to go. So again, thanks Azra for the idea. And the last deck we're going to take a look at is actually going to be the Quartzmon control deck that I mentioned before. Now, I love the idea of this deck. It uses a lot of the white cards, some of the green cards, and the game plan here is just really solid. You've got a ton of Tamers in Minnow Bellucci. You've got the 3 copies of the Digimon Kaiser, as well as 2 copies of Analog Boy. This is a win rate 60% if folks are trying to figure out what this card is right here. Kind of hard to see because of the glare, but it is the white option card here. And then the idea is to just like kind of play the Quartzmon game plan, but now Quartzmon takes advantage of being able to play things like the Digimon Kaiser. On the lower end here, you've got the Terriermons, who are just providing a little bit of disruption support in stopping your opponent from gaining memory outside of Tamers, as well as giving you memory every time you play a Tamer here with the parallel Terriermon there. And then it has the option to go into the Rapidmon here just for a little bit of removal. You've also got a couple copies of really cheap blockers here in the couple Terriermon. And then the top in the deck, it utilizes, of course, 6 copies here of the Quartzmon, as well as 3 copies of Quartzmon, and then 1 copy of good old Death Xmon, just to make sure your opponent really doesn't have a good time. But yeah, the control tools in this deck seem pretty solid. It seems like a really interesting build overall, and because, you know, Quartzmon does have that green, black, white like mix, it does kind of seem like it slots right in as the upper end of the deck, going right after your Quartzmon. So again, the Quartzmon here is going to allow you to play other Quartzmons from your hand, and then this one here is going to be used for removal. Just a really nice way to control the board, go wide when you need to, and start making swings whenever you want. And so that's going to be it for the BT12 Week 3 across time meta over here in Asia. Something to keep in mind, especially with this meta specifically, is that like this Friday, as of the recording of this video, the EX4 alternate being set is going to be dropping. So this meta is technically coming to a close here. We might have one more week of results, and I'm not sure if I'm going to cover it or not, just because I'll be like traveling to the States at that time. But again, this is kind of like the last hurrah for the meta. EX4 is dropping. I think a lot of stuff is coming out for that set. And you know, with any new set release, you expect to see a couple of changes in the meta overall. So honestly, the folks over on the EN side of the game, when BT12 drops for you guys, you might get more time with this meta than we did. So you guys will have a bit more time to flesh it out than we did over here in Asia. I will say that personally, I'm super excited that Beelzemon has kind of like shot up in prominence after the advanced deck was released. I think that bodes really well for not only the Beelzemon deck, but any advanced decks they release in the future. I think folks will know that they're going to be able to get their hands on some actual really good quality cards. If they're already competitive in the game and they want to just like try a new deck out without having to like find all the cards separately, that's a really, really cool idea in my opinion. Anyway, folks, let me know what you guys are excited about in either EX4 alternate being or this meta specifically when it drops over on the EN side of the game. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.